What's up, YouTube? So we're carrying on with the Goa-Trance series. Today we're looking at another synth that featured quite extensively in the Goa-Trance genre, and that's the Roland SH-101. So I believe this synth was used by guys like Hallucinogen and Eat Static, who are both quite well known in Goa-Trance, and probably some others as well, but those are the ones that I kind of know of. So I've actually got one of these synths, but because I thought it's probably not very accessible to you guys, I'm going to show you guys a free emulation plugin of the synthesizer so you can create these sounds and everything. And I want to show you a couple of things that kind of make this synth special. So yeah, let's dive in and have a look. So the plugin is called TAL-Bassline by Togu Audio Line, and it's free, so I'm going to post a link in the description. I believe there is a paid-for version that's a little bit more extensive in the features, but to get the actual sound of the SH-101, you can use this free version, and I think the only extras that you get are like a built-in sequencer and stuff like that, but I'll show you guys a couple of ways around that. So one of the downsides about this plugin is it's incredibly small, so I mean, I've got my monitor's quite far away because it's like behind this camera, so it's a little bit hard for me to kind of see. So, I mean, you guys might struggle with that as well if you've got HD monitors and stuff like that. But the cool thing about the layout of the SH-101 and of this plugin is it's so incredibly kind of intuitive and easy to use that once you get the hang of it, I'm pretty sure you'll know where all of these sort of connections are. And it's laid out exactly as it would be on the actual SH-101. So you could look at a larger picture like on another screen or on your phone or something like that to navigate your way around the plugin, if it is a little bit kind of hard to see. But anyway, I'm kind of blabbering now. So the main things to look out for the synth is like, this is your oscillator section over here, where it says source mixer. So this is where you choose what sort of shape your oscillator is. So you've got the choice of a pulse, a saw, and then a sub oscillator as well. So the difference here is it doesn't switch between them. It kind of like, you mix the different shapes in. And one thing to note about the SH-101 is it kind of, once you go above, I think about like sort of 80% or so on the slider, you get a slight bit of saturation on the waveform, which can kind of sweeten up some of the sounds, but also it can sometimes make a sound, like say for example, if you're trying to create a lush sound, it can overdrive it a little bit too much. So that's something to take into consideration when you are creating sounds on a SH-101 or on an emulation of that synth. By default, when you start the plugin, it's got the saw on 100% and the sub on 100%. Now, I'm not sure if this emulates that kind of saturation exactly as it would be in the hardware, but generally what I'll do is I'll kind of move this down a little bit, and then if I want to add that saturation, I'll just boost it a little bit over here. So we're going to start with just a saw wave, because I'm pretty sure all of you guys kind of know what that sounds like. It's the basis of a lot of the like lead sounds and stuff in electronic music. So here we've got the VCF. It's a very simple filter. You've got frequency, resonance, and then this is your modulation control for the filter. Envelope, mod, and key track. So essentially, if you want just a flat sound, you don't want the envelope to control the filter, you'd want to turn this down. And then you've got control over the filter of the sound. So I'm just going to show you kind of what this sounds like quick. So like I said, it's a very basic synth, but I think, one of the kind of beauties of Goa-Trance is that the machines that they used were pretty basic, but they kind of pushed the boundaries of what was possible with those machines. I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you give somebody kind of too much control, they end up doing the same sort of things over and over again, because with so much control and without a sort of limitation, it's hard to kind of know where those boundaries lay and how to kind of push those boundaries and stuff like that. So I think when you're sort of granted with a slightly simpler workflow or simpler machine or something like that, you end up, doing different things every time, because you're a lot more comfortable with the way it works and the workflow and stuff like that. And yeah, I just think it creates a little bit more of a sort of creative environment. Obviously, having other options is worthwhile, but I think for sound design, especially for these kind of like classic sounds, having a particular limitation is definitely a good thing. So today I'm going to look at creating a couple of sort of psychedelic effects and stuff that we can use throughout the track, and a couple of techniques that I like to use to kind of like play the 101 and to play a couple of like effects, and a sort of simple approach that kind of pushes you to sort of perform the sound as opposed to, you know, punch in the MIDI, render it out, and Bob's your uncle, you know, to kind of really get in there and perform the sounds. And I think that's another key aspect of the Goa-Trance sound. So what I like to do is, let's actually just put some effects onto this raw sound. I'm going to put a color copy, which is a delay effect. And I'm going to put a reverb, which I've actually already got on a send channel. I'm going to save the explanation for that for a separate video. But yeah, stay tuned for that anyway. So I've just put a delay and a reverb on the sound. So I'm not sure if you noticed at the beginning of this video, I had a MIDI controller like right here. So the idea now is to set up a couple of parameters within your plugin and within your effects that you can play around with while your track is playing and record the output to get these kind of like varying sounds. And, you know, you just keep sort of performing those sounds. And I think that's when you sort of start to find these kind of magical moments in the mistakes and stuff like that, as opposed to punching in the same MIDI that you do every time and the same modulation patterns and stuff like that. So check this out. So in Cubase, you've got this thing called quick controls. It's similar to, I think it's your macros in your devices in Ableton, where the last parameter you can basically set to one of these 8 quick controls. And my MIDI controller automatically is linked, these 8 MIDI knobs here is automatically linked to those quick controls. So what I want to do is I want to set a couple of parameters within the 101 to those quick controls, as well as a couple of parameters in that delay plugin. So let's do this over here. In Cubase, how we do this is you click on QC Learn mode, then you click on the slot, and then you move the parameter. So let's go cutoff, let's go resonance, let's go mod, maybe the rate here, LFO rate. We might come back to those, but then I'll leave 2 open just in case. And then let's open up the delay effect that we've got on the channel. And you can actually link these to the same quick controls here, which is pretty cool. So let's link the regen and the rate so we can get some like warpy kind of sounds going. So now what we've done is we've created like a sort of playable patch, and the MIDI controller automatically obviously links up to those first 8 parameters. So we can either punch in like one long MIDI note, let it play and kind of play around, or we can use the MIDI controller and play with those parameters and kind of get comfortable with what each of those parameters are doing, and try stay away from like using the computer and getting too kind of like in depth with what more advanced features can do, and try focus on like performing this sort of setup that you've created. So like play around with these kind of like parameters that you've linked up. I mean, what I want to do here is I want to actually change this LFO sign to a sample and hold, which is kind of like a serum chaos oscillator when you set that to SNH, obviously, because it's an SNH. But for those who might not know what SNH means, it's kind of like a stepped random modulation. So this is very cool to create like varying kind of alien sort of noises, especially when you use it with like that kind of delayed atmospheric effect. So check this out. So here what I like to do is I like to set up an audio track and pass the audio out of this plugin and into that audio track and then record it kind of live while the kick and bass and stuff is playing. So you get more of that kind of performative music creation process going rather than a kind of like more editing heavy music creation process. So how we do that in Cubase is I think you actually have to use a group channel. So we can head over to our mixer, right click on the channel that we want to record, add group channel. We can just call this record group, add track. And now we add an audio track, change the input over here later to record group. So now we should be able to record that audio live into this audio track. So I want to mute all these synths and stuff in the track. And so we can let the kick and bass and percussion play and record this audio track that we created and just record in some sort of random effects and stuff and, while we perform them. And then we can come back and kind of cherry pick the best parts. I think it also helps to kind of get comfortable with that kind of mapping that you created first, so you know what's actually happening while you're doing it. But at the same time, it's nice to kind of also, try random things. So not kind of being bound too much by the knowledge of what you've linked that stuff to could also be a good thing, kind of like moving those parameters blind. You could essentially do something that you may not have planned that could result in something that sounds really good. But so yeah, anyway, so let's hit record and let this happen. So here, what I also want to do is, instead of being able to tweak that LFO rate, let's maybe set it to a couple of clock divisions. So let's try a 1/8. anyways, you get the idea. So what I'll do is I'll kind of like let that loop play and record in a bunch of kind of effects and stuff while playing with these parameters. And often I'll kind of sometimes mistakenly do something that sounds good, and I'm glad that I've kind of like recorded that little performance aspect in. And a lot of those things can create that kind of unique movement in your track that, you know, simple kind of like digital automation inside a DAW really struggles to kind of capture that sort of liveliness. But anyway, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to sort of cherry pick these best parts. I'll probably fast forward through this and then play a little section with a couple of these just to give you a reference of what that like total sound sounds like. Cool, so what I'm going to do is I've arranged all of those into a cool little loop. So I'm going to group them and just EQ them kind of loosely. I'm not going to spend too much time doing that. I kind of want to retain that kind of raw nature of the sound. Put them all into a group. And I might just create like a loop out of that. Let's just see how this goes. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel.